to go ahead and talk about the differences between spanning, mirroring, port monitoring, remote spanning, RSpan, and taps. When do I use which, and why do I care? Our goals. So different capture scenarios, and we'll answer the question for each of the different types of scenarios. What is it? What do I get? Where's my benefit? What don't I get? And what will it cost? And so we'll look at capturing from a switch, capturing from a span session, capturing from an RSpan session, capturing from a tap, and then example scenarios. All right. So let's say my goal is to go ahead and look at an issue with Wireshark, and I just plug into a switch. I'm a little schleppy user. I pop in. What am I going to see? So I can see everything that the Wireshark station says, and everything's said to it. Okay. So I can see my own stuff, and I can see any traffic going as far as broadcast, multicast, right, for the VLAN that I'm physically in. Okay. So I plug into a switch, I get broadcast and multicast for that VLAN, and I get bored. So what does that cost? It's free. Let's say that I go ahead and capture from a span port. So a span port, some vendors call it spanning, obviously Cisco, calls it spanning. Other vendors call it mirroring, Nortel, HP. Others call it monitoring, very common. So different vendors call it different things. So let's say my goal is to go ahead in this little environment and, for example, I want to see all of these little users go ahead and hit these servers. So I have to go ahead and configure that top switch to make a copy from the uplink or the trunk port on over to my Wireshark. And that they refer to it as spanning or mirroring or port monitoring. So I have to go ahead and make a configuration on the change on the switch. It'll go ahead and make a copy of everything going in or out to that port, send it over to my analyzer. Or it might just make a copy of everything coming in, or everything going out, or both. It depends. So I have to bear that in mind. Or depending on my switch, I might have the possibility of doing multiple ports on over to my analyzer. Or I might be able to do a whole VLAN over to my analyzer. Or I might be able to do the backplane over to my analyzer. Then I have lots of traffic to play with. But that's more interesting. It gives me a chance to actually see what's going on and who's talking to who and what are they doing. Okay. Yeah. So it all just depends on what's available on the switch. All right. So what do I get? The traffic that I need to see. Maybe. Maybe not. That's going to completely depend on how I set up the span and where I set up the span. So for example, let's say that my goal is to watch X talk to server C. So what I need to know is the physical path that takes to get on up into C. And then I have to decide, where do I want to set that span up? Do I want to go ahead and mirror it here as it leaves this switch? Do I want to mirror it here as it hits the top switch? It needs to be taller. Or do I want to go ahead and mirror here when it hits the server itself? I don't know. It depends. Okay. Depends on my goal. So, depending on where I go ahead and set up my capture, set up my span, it's going to depend on what I'm going to see. I might get a lot more than what I need, or I might not get what I need. If, let's say that when I go ahead and look at the switch and based on my documentation, theoretically, server C is hanging off interface, FE0/7. So that's where I set up the span. But that's not actually where the server is. And I'm sitting there capturing away, wondering why nobody's talking. Okay? So I have to make sure that I set that up correctly. So I might see it, might not. And I might see all of it, and I might not. So my switch might go ahead and have some type of issue buffering that traffic and sending it over to my analyzer. So now the benefit, of course, is I can look at multiple stations at once. So depending on my switch, maybe I want to go ahead and look at my web server And then the clients go ahead and hit that web server, and I also want to look at the database server too. So depending on my switch, I want to monitor both ports and send that over to my analyzer. Just depends on what's available on my switch. Let's say that my goal is to look at all of the servers hanging off that switch. Well, my switch will only let me, let's say my switch lets me go ahead and span up to, 5 ports or something like that. And I have 24 servers. All right, now I'm like, great, now what do I do? Okay. Well, I can, depending on my switch, go ahead and span the server VLAN. I don't know, has anybody ever done that? So let's say that I go ahead, I'm greedy, right? I want it all. Remember how I said that? So let's say I go ahead and I span the entire VLAN. So we've got a couple servers hanging off. I can't believe I'm using like real talk. Is this not so funny? Okay. So I've got a couple servers hanging off this switch. And let's say they're all in one VLAN. And I want to go ahead and see all the traffic coming in and out of those servers. So I go ahead and monitor VLAN 20. Which means go ahead, take a copy of all that stuff, send it on over here. This is now going to be my Wireshark. Well, that's all great, because now I can see the whole VLAN, which is really sweet, and I'm very excited. However, when this little client right over here goes ahead and sends a packet on over to the server, the client is in VLAN 50, let's say. And all my servers are in VLAN 20. So I have my client go ahead and hit my server. Client goes ahead, sends a packet, switch goes ahead and creates a virtual circuit, sends it on over into VLAN 20 and on out the interface. After he's done that, he goes ahead, he makes a copy, he sends it on over to Wireshark. It's fabulous. Server goes ahead and responds, same thing. Everything's great. Now, let's say though, that this is a web server, and this is my Oracle backend. So now, the web server goes ahead and makes a backend call to this Oracle server. So a copy goes ahead and is sent out this interface, which goes to Wireshark, going to this interface, which goes to Wireshark. Then the Oracle server responds, which goes to Wireshark, and then is sent to the web server, which is sent to Wireshark. Next thing you know, I open up a trace file and I have 8 million retransmissions, and I'm like, what went wrong there? And I'm like, well, there's wrong right there. You've got all these retransmissions in your network, and you've got some kind of physical problem, and that's what it is. And then I look like an idiot. Okay. All right. So, and the issue is I'm seeing 2 copies of the same packet. Okay. Let's talk about timing for a second. So we've got seconds, milliseconds, microseconds. If I go ahead and I'm looking at Wireshark and I see that the difference in time between the first packet and the retransmission are in microseconds, then I know, aha, that's 2 copies of the same packet. TCP doesn't retransmit that fast. TCP retransmits more along this scenario, okay, more along seconds all the way through milliseconds. So that's a normal TCP retransmission. I don't know if y'all know or if you've learned along this week, but in TCP, when we do the handshake, we actually time that back and forth. And we base our retransmission timer on that delta time in between that conversation. So if I go ahead and I send you a SYN packet to synchronize up, and then you respond to me, both of us go ahead and use the delta time in between there to figure out what our retransmission timer should be. Then as we go along and we have this long conversation between the 2 of us, we go ahead and adjust that timer as the conversation goes along. It's a very dynamic timer. But it's all based on that initial handshake. So that's why it travels across quite a few numbers here. Okay? That's why it's between seconds, hundreds of milliseconds, tens of milliseconds, milliseconds, whatever. But it sure ain't going to get down to microseconds. Okay? So, we'll talk about that in a minute. So if I'm seeing, millions and millions of retransmissions, more than likely I'm getting 2 packets. 2 copies of the same packet. The hard part is, when I span a VLAN, is, when the client talked to the server, it looked normal. Command goes in, response goes back, it's all beautiful and fabulous. It was only when people within the VLAN spoke to each other that I got 2 copies. So I thought everything was great, then all of a sudden I'm seeing tons of retransmissions, but it's only between certain stations. So I actually start going ahead and trying to troubleshoot this. If everybody had been in VLAN 20, then it would have been more obvious to me, because every single packet would have been seen twice. So those are the things that make you crazy. Okay. So I want you to be aware of that. Now, here we go. All right. So what don't I get when I go ahead and I set up my span session? Well, you can't depend on your delta times. There's my trouble. Okay. So, especially, these are all the things that are going to affect my delta times. So let's say that I've got a gigabit server, and I'm spanning that, and I'm capturing off a 100 megabit port. So I go ahead and I mirror it over to a 100 megabit port. My delta times are garbage. I just don't even bother to look up. All right. Because my switch has to go ahead and buffer that traffic and translate the timing. Translate the encoding scheme. So mixing speeds, never a good idea. All right. So I want to go ahead, if I'm mirroring a single gigabit port, like I'm mirroring the uplink in the diagram, and that's a gigabit uplink, then I better be capturing with a gigabit analyzer. All right. I want a 1 Wireshark on my gigabit port. Okay. That's why you always want to check when you're first starting your Wireshark is what speed is your Wireshark set. Yeah, what speed is your card? When you auto-negotiate it, what did you negotiate to? And you want to track that within the name of your trace file. Okay, so that you remember next time when you go back to look at it. The other issue is mixing speeds within the VLAN. So let's say we go ahead, we set up, we span our entire VLAN, and some of our servers that are 100 megabit, and some of them are a gig. Do I capture with 100? Do I capture with gig? They're all different. Okay. So I have that issue with mixing speeds. I also have the issue when I'm combining all of these servers together. Remember how we had 24 servers? And that's a small environment. Usually we're in hundreds. Right? So let's say that I'm spanning an entire VLAN. I've got 50 servers in it, and I'm spanning it to a single port. What are the odds that that switch is going to have to do some buffering and then send those packets on down? Yeah. So initially, the client command went to the server, and the server responded in let's say 300 milliseconds. That's forever when they're local to each other like this. Okay, that's forever. But because I'm spanning the entire VLAN, and I send that traffic over to the single sniffer, then I'm squishing all of that data together and then spitting it out that little port just as fast as I can. And so now all of my delta times are all like this, squished. And it looks like that server is responding really, really fast. That server looks good. Yeah, not really. Yeah, okay. So there's that issue. Then let's say I go ahead and I set up filtering within my span session. So for example, we were mirroring this uplink down here on up here. So all of my users and my phones and what have you, and that's all going up to that Wireshark up there. Well, let's say that because I'm limited by how many sessions I'm allowed to have, because you can have it all, but you can have it all at once. So I'm limited in my span session numbers that I don't really want to see all that traffic. I want to go ahead and just focus on server B, my file server. So I go ahead and I set up a filter within the span session. Well, that's just putting even more load on that switch to go ahead and think about that. So if I go ahead and do that, then I'm even putting a bigger load, and I'm more likely to go ahead and affect those delta times, number one. And, I'm definitely going to affect the delta times. And number two, I might be putting too much of a load on that switch to go ahead and do that type of filtering and buffering for that entire unit. And now I start dropping packets within my switch. My switch's core duty in life is to switch those packets. And if you got a copy in that span session, just be grateful, okay? Because that is not my top priority, alrighty? So, I might get them all, I might not. And the kicker is if, let's say that our web server was going to go ahead and talk to our Oracle backend, and it dropped a packet between those two, more likely my switch is going to track that in his statistics, and so I could see drops. Well, if he goes ahead and sends that packet on over to D, but he doesn't quite make the copy over to the Wireshark, well, more likely he's not going to keep track of that in the statistics. So I never know. I have no way of telling. Until I look at the trace file and I'm like, all right, I see the server respond and nobody ever asked him for anything. Yeah, what's up with that? Okay, so yes. And then you spend, a lot of time fixing something that's not broken. Because you're looking at the trace and you think that this happened because that's what you see, but that's not what really happened. Okay. Let's see. What don't I get? Oh yeah, so multiple sessions. So depending on your switch vendor, it depends on how many sessions you've got. How come I care so much about delta times? Okay, because that's how I make a living. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out, people pay me to go ahead and come out onto the network and prove whose fault it is. So I get a lot of people saying, okay, well, we have an issue with this application, we're having an issue with this server, we're having an issue with this, an issue with that, and we're trying to figure out whose fault is it. And I get to be Switzerland and come in and tell them. Okay? And a lot of times, it's network guys who hire me, so it's my job to prove it's not the network. Okay, so it all just depends on who's writing the bill. All right? So that's why I focus so much on delta times. And that's how I prove whose fault it is. When we were looking at this scenario, and I've got Wireshark running over here, and I've got my client right here, let's talk for a minute about what type of response time we should expect and what we're looking at with the delta times so you see how important they are. So I've got a client who is accessing this server over here. And do you want to have the server go 100 megabit or gig?
100.
100. Okay, so we've got the server running at 100 megabit. So I, of course, go ahead and check my switch and make sure that I then hard code my Wireshark to go 100 so that my times match. Okay. And I'm capturing over here at the server. So I'm going to go ahead and span that one port on over to Wireshark. Client goes ahead, sends a TCP connection request on over to my web server, so we have a SYN. Hits that web server. That is the most important thing to that web server in life, is to answer that SYN. It's one of the most critical things within the operating stack. So that is, the response time for that is the fastest it'll be for anything. So that tells me how fast that server is. Right? It'll have the least amount of server processing time. So if I go ahead and I look at that traffic and I see the client SYN requests go in, and so that's packet number 1. And then I see the web server respond with the SYN ACK. And packet number 2. I can't believe I'm actually using chalk. Oh my god. So packet number 2 is my SYN ACK. So since I'm capturing here at the server, now I know that the delta time in between these two packets in my Wireshark, there we go. That tells me how fast my server can respond to anything. So now my expectation, since this is a 100 megabit server, is I should see response time within tens of microseconds. So 100 megabit, TCP SYN. TCP SYN. Assuming we're local, okay? Because remember, we're capturing right here at the server. And I'm looking at how fast it took for the client to send in the packet and then the server to respond. Now, in my drawing, my client is hanging off the same switch. My client could be 300,000 miles away, and I'm still looking at the same thing because I'm capturing here at the server. Right? So my difference between when that SYN came in and the SYNET came out, if that's a 100 megabit server, I should see that within tens of microseconds. Now let's say that we go ahead and we hit this guy. He's the file server. And let's put him at gig. So of course I change my Wireshark and make it gig as well. Okay. Watch the same thing. Client goes ahead and hits the file server. Server's running gig. I want to see that in tens of microseconds. Excuse me. I want to see that in microseconds. Gig. Let's try that again. Gig. I can spell it the way I can. TCP SYN. There we go. So, if it takes longer than that, then I know I've got a stack issue and resource issue on that server. I haven't even hit the application yet. I haven't hit layer 7. You know, I went to the web server, I sent my little GET, I expect my little OK, my 200, and my HTTP. But I haven't even hit that yet. I'm still doing the handshake. So if that's slower than what I expect for that speed of server, as far as the NIC card, then I know that I've got a problem with the server's operating system or the resources therein. Then, once I go ahead and I watch the handshake, and now I watch the client go ahead and send requests up the upper layer. You know, we complete our nice little TCP handshake, so we get a third packet with an ACK, right? And now packet number 4, we're going to do a GET. And I go ahead and I watch the client do that, and I watch the server respond. I already have a baseline for how fast he can respond. Now I can see how fast the application layer responds to that request. And I can see the difference therein. That's why I love those times. Okay? That's why they're important. Alright, so what don't I get when I go ahead and I set up a span session? Because, I mean, span sessions are great, man. You know, like you go in, you set it up, you're done, you're capturing your little heart out. It's all fabulous. But there's things that I don't get. So I don't get all the packets that I think I'm going to because my switch is dropping packets, so I have packet droppage. I don't always get them in the order they actually happened because my switch will go ahead and do buffering and then might send them down in the same order that they originally came in, might not. It depends. Depends on the load I have on my switch and how much traffic I'm spanning. The more I span, the more likely I am to have droppage and reordering. Because, and so what you do is you go ahead and you check the statistics on the switch for what is the memory utilization. And you're also looking at what is the actual network utilization. So if I've got a gigabit switch and I'm hitting at like 10, 15% utilization, in a gigabit environment, that's actually kind of high. And so I want to really go ahead and watch that. And I want to see what is the memory utilization. Now I go ahead and I set up my span, and all of a sudden I see my memory utilization really spike. Oops. I'm much more likely to go ahead and have droppage. Hey, come on in. So I want to watch that as I'm setting that span up. Okay. The more high my memory utilization is on my switch, the more likely I am to have issues like that. Droppage, changes within the order, things like that. I also am not going to get physically damaged frames. Because if I go ahead and I ask this server to go, ask this switch to go ahead and make a copy of every single packet coming in and out of that port on over to my analyzer, on over to Wireshark, if packets are flying by, and let's say we got an issue on this cable, you know, good old-fashioned physical problem. All right, my cable is bad. And I have bad CRC packets flying across that wire. The switch, when he gets them, he's like, oh, these are bad packets. The CRC is bad. Okay. I certainly am not going to make a copy and send it over to the analyzer port. They don't want that. It's bad. Okay? So I'm not going to get a copy. Oh, and let's pretend that the switch actually makes me a copy. You know, because maybe it does. You know, it depends on the switch. Totally depends on the switch. So let's say my switch makes me a copy, so here I am capturing it in Wireshark, and you know the whole reason I'm doing this is because there was a physical problem, and that's why it's slow in the first place, right? And my Wireshark might bring it into the buffer, might not. It depends. Because that's completely dependent upon the driver of the card to go ahead and bring in those physically damaged packets. More than likely, my driver, even if they happen, if they're flying by, my driver might not bring it in. So that's why I said, you know, I might not have been able to get it anyway. Okay? But if I believe that there's a physical problem, I don't even get Wireshark out for that. I would have already started checking all my switch statistics, looking for those little duplex mismatch thingies, all right? I don't even go ahead and get Wireshark out for that, all right? So I've already found that, okay? But realize that, you know, I won't see physically damaged strings, okay? You might get them copied, you might not. All right, so what do I get also, too? Continued. But wait, there's more. As many sessions as I want and need. Now, let's say, and I'm going to have a picture with the beautiful, you know, network diagram of the 14 switches and the different, you know, the core layer, the access layer, the distribution layer, and the great load balancing and redundancy connections they're in, okay? So let's say I have many redundant links for load balancing and fault tolerance. Well, when the request goes by, it goes on one path, and then when the response comes back, it goes on another path. So I'm capturing my little heart out, and I see all the commands go by, and no responses. Now, I know that the server must be responding because my client's TCP stack, you know, their sequence numbers are incrementing, and at the application layer, it's asking for new stuff, and you're not allowed to ask for new stuff till you get the old stuff. So I know the client's getting what they need, but I'm not seeing it in Wireshark because it went down a different physical path. So then you have to go ahead and set the span session for that one as well. Okay, so you can still get it. You just have to realize that you have to go ahead and change that configuration to still get it. Okay, you got to think about stuff like this. And then, of course, you know, not all switches can do it, but you know, most of them do. Good one will be able to go ahead and do span sessions. Okay, so what will it cost? Well, the first time you ever do a span session, you want to test that in a non-production time. Because, as you can well imagine, if we do a lot of span, we set up a huge hairy span session, and there's tons and tons of buffering, and all of a sudden it causes the switch to have droppage, and we go ahead and affect the users, and then you get fired, okay? Right. Right now, that's a big issue, okay? So, I want to test that during a non-production time to make sure that, you know, my switch vendor said that it would do this, but it really doesn't. I want to know that ahead of time, okay? So I want to test that first, okay? I have to go ahead and take the time to configure the switch because the syntax for it is completely different depending on your vendor, and then depending upon the model within the vendor. I have on my phone the switch syntax for iOS for 6500 Cisco because I can never remember what it is. And that's the one I do the most often. And then 2900s because that's what I have at the house. So, and they're different. Okay. So I have both of them on my phone so that I always know what the syntax is. Okay. So I can't even remember it. And then, of course, it's different for HP ProCurve, so I have to remember that because I teach that switch. And so, and then it's different too, depending on what software we're running for which particular switch and which version of code we're running. So you got to remember which syntax it all is. Yeah, there's not space in my buffer for that. So I got to bear that in mind, okay? And I have a possible outage depending on how much I'm hitting my memory buffer of my switch. And I could make a loop if it's been misconfigured in my span session. And yes, I have accidentally done that. At a law firm, no less. Oops. If anybody's going to sue you for bringing down their network, it's going to be a law firm. And I did. I was doing it on because so I had the Cisco, and I know it for ProCurve, and I know it for Cisco because I've done that before, no worries. And they have a different vendor, 3Con, at their site, and I have them to set this up, and I've never done it before. And normally what I do is I ask the customer, I'm like, okay, we need this, you do it. But they weren't there that day. And he's like, yeah, you can do it. It's okay. Just set it up. Sorry, it's no worries. Okay, great. And like an idiot, I did it. So I go ahead and I create the span session, and I'm used to having the syntax of copy from here to here. And number one, I'm in a GUI interface as opposed to the command line. So you already know I'm in trouble, right? And for that particular switch, it's already defaulted for port 1 to be the one you're copying from. And you just put in who you're copying to, and if you hit OK, it copies from 1 on over to you. Well, no, I expected it to ask me, now, okay, this is where your analyzer is, now where would you like to copy from? But that's not how it worked. It went with the default, and next thing you know, I was already sending packet number 1, port number 1, which of course was going to the router to get out, and now I just made a circle. Brought it to its knees. Yeah, don't do that. So I have to bear in mind that, if we make any little, hiccups there in the span session configuration, you might have a problem there. Then, I also have to have an available port on the switch itself. Well, you walk into the wire closet, and you've got all your switches, and every single port's used. And of course, that's the one that I want. I'm hanging off this switch, and I want to go ahead and look at the servers, and that's one I really, really, really want. And of course, yeah, no empty ports there. I hope he's okay. That's a bad cough. All right. So I have to have an available port on the switch, okay? And I may or may not have that. All right. Now, so when is this a good thing to do? Okay. In Bettyland, we span one interface at a time. We don't span the VLAN in Bettyland. All right. So I go ahead and I look at one interface at a time. I always ask for a network diagram, and I want to draw out the physical path things take, and I go ahead and try to capture based on when I will get the most people accessing that resource. So in this example, instead of just mirroring, Z's port on over to the analyzer, because my goal was to see traffic going to the server and the users hitting the server, I go ahead and hit the uplink, because then I could get all the users going up to the servers. Right? So I try to look at a physical path diagram, and so that I still only mirror a single port, but I get more than one person. Because I'm greedy, I want to know. I always match my speeds, and it's perfect too when my goal is to just make sure that the client commands are hitting the server and that the server's responding appropriately. But I don't care how fast. All right? Let's just say I just want to make sure it's getting there and a response is coming back. How fast it happens is completely irrelevant to me. In that environment, spanning is perfect because your switch is already there. You don't have to do anything. You just set the configuration up and you're done. That's great. Okay. But if my goal is to see how fast it happens, then now what I want to do has changed. So if my goal is just to make sure that the server does respond something, I don't care what, then okay, fine. Then spanning is a great thing. Now, anybody ever do rspan? What it is let's say that I want to go ahead and have my analyzer here, and I want to see all the traffic coming to or from the database server. But let's say I don't have an available port on the switch, maybe. Okay, remember, we filled up that switch. It's got all our server farm on it. So I can't go ahead and connect the server here. Excuse me, connect the Wireshark here. Or let's say that switch is actually 4 buildings away, and I'm too lazy to get in the car and walk around and go over there. So, I'm already over here. Okay. So the idea of RSPAN or remote mirroring is, let me go ahead and configure this switch to have an RSPAN VLAN or a remote mirror VLAN. And I will go ahead and take this server as the source that I'm copying. I've got to go ahead and tag it all the way down so that it, on the trunk link to say that yes, RSPAN VLAN number whatever, 200 let's say. 200 can go ahead and hit that trunk. Comes on down to this switch, and I put this port as the destination for RSPAN VLAN 200, and a copy is sent from this port on this switch down here on over to Wireshark, which is great because then I get the traffic that I need. The problem is, of course, I can't believe any of the delta times. I just made it worse. It was bad enough. Now I made it worse. So, so it might be actually, in the same rack, and these are, right close together, and I just don't have available ports. Or I might have a switch that's, 4 buildings over, which is, I'm on a MAN network, a metropolitan area network, and that's actually a couple miles away. So my goal is convenience for RSPAN. And the great thing is I can go ahead and copy that traffic for a single interface or for a whole VLAN. For a single interface, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to go over 4 buildings and plug into that switch. For a whole VLAN, on the other hand, that is when RSPAN is really cool. Because let's say that I have 8 switches, and VLAN 20 is in, there's some of VLAN 20 in all 8 switches. And let's say my goal is to see all the traffic in VLAN 20. Well, I can't plug Wireshark into 8 different switches all at one time. I mean, I could, I just have to have 8 different laptops. And I'd have to file merge all the files together. Oh, doesn't that sound like fun? Right? Yeah. So the idea is, let me go ahead and I want to span the VLAN. Nobody said how to do that. I'm going to span the VLAN for the remote span, and I'm going to pull all the traffic that's for VLAN 20 out of every single one of those switches and send it all on down to my Wireshark. That is cool. My trouble is then, of course, my delta times are completely skewed. I have to enunciate that really carefully for the camera. My delta times are completely skewed, and I can't believe any of them. But oh my gosh, now I can go ahead and see how much traffic's for VLAN 20. And if that is my goal, then that is a really cool and sexy thing. Okay. So, okay, traffic's tagged, transmitted via the trunks, and then away to the destination. Okay. I just want to look up and make sure I hit everything. Now, so, oh yes, so there's my key benefit. Okay. Now, the problem, of course, with this is I could get multiple copies of the same packet, depending on how everything is laid out. If people within VLAN 20 speak to each other, then I'm back in that same scenario of having multiple packets. But if what I'm looking at is VLAN 20 talking to VLAN 30, then I'm okay. But if they're VLAN 20 talking to VLAN 20, I'm back in the same scenario. Okay, so I have to worry about that. And I can go ahead and create an ACL to filter out different traffic for that port. Let's say that I'm spanning all of VLAN 20, but I really only care about 4 people. So I created an ACL, and I'm spanning the entire VLAN all over the place, but only those 4 people are going to be in the ACL to send over to the span port. Excuse me, not to the span port, excuse me, to the Wireshark, which is great. Because it's like a capture filter, but it's actually even better because it's based on what traffic is actually sent to Wireshark in the first place. The problem is, now I've done RSPAN all over the place in my 8 different switches, and then I filtered it. Those delta times are completely skewed, and it's more likely to have created too much of a resource hog on each of those 8 switches. Yeah. and because there's my other issue too. So I've created that demand on each switches to go ahead and filter that, and to do the airspan in the first place. And I'm flinging this traffic across 8 different switches. Well, now I'm having that traffic copied again across those 8 switches. So when George sent out a multicast in VLAN 20, yeah, that traffic went through all the 8 switches, but now all of the unicast traffic that George is sending, and Susie and Myron and Bill, now all of that is going through all 8 switches and coming down the wire chart. So I'm putting a huge load on those switches in addition to the regular traffic they're already doing. Okay.
So then, if your traffic is 50% or less, is where you would do this. If you see traffic that's 50% or more of the bandwidth, you're not going to want to do this because are you doubling?
Not so much that I'm doubling, because it all depends on what the physical path that traffic was taking. So if Bill talked to Susie and that was within a single switch, then before that was staying in the switch. Mm-hmm. Now it's going through 8 switches along the path between my source and now the Wireshark destination. So that's coming down the trunk via 8 different switches. Whereas if I had just left it alone, it was going to stay on the single switch.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm putting stuff through the trunk that I don't need to. But there's no way for me to calculate how much traffic stays within a switch or 2 switches that now is going through all 8 trunks. So it's not like a 50 and now I'm doubling it kind of math.
So you just have to monitor.
Right. Yes. Yes. This is not one of those things that we configure it and set it up and then go home. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. How do we want to have a job when we go back? Okay. So yes, because there's a big cost there. So, but there's an incredible, wonderful convenience factor, but at a great cost. Mm-hmm. So it depends. It depends. But yeah. Okay. Personally, if I'm looking at traffic that is exceeding 10 to 20%, I don't like to span more than 1 port. I mean, you hit 50, so you're like living even more on the edge. I'm a little more conservative, and if I'm exceeding 10 to 15 to 20% utilization on a switch, I don't like to mirror more than 1 port.
And that's your average, or that's your peak of 15?
That's my average, because that leaves room for me to peak. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, maybe you were thinking 50 is your peak, and I'm thinking 20 is my average, and we're both saying the same thing, and we just didn't even know it.
No, I was thinking that
50 is your average? Yeah. See, I'm paranoid. Yeah. So it depends. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and set it and watch your memory utilization. You see it spike, you got a problem. Alrighty. So, of course, I'm not going to get valid delta times because, oh my lord, who is the one who does the timestamp? Does anybody know? When you're looking at Wireshark and you're looking at the trace file, okay, who actually did that delta timestamp? Does anybody know? The driver of the card that's using the Wireshark, that's the one that does the time stamping. So if I'm doing a remote mirroring, and that had to come down 8 different trunk ports before it got to me, well, there's been a long time passed from the time that actually left the server up 8 switches up to the time it got to me. Now here I am at the analyzer, boom, I just time stamped it. Now I watch the response come back. My delta times will never be right, ever. Every single trunk that it has to hit is going to add some latency. And the kicker is, when the response comes back, it's not like, well, they're all off, so it's okay. Because they're all going to be off to varying degree, depending upon how saturated each one of those trunk links were at the moment that packet went through. So I cannot look at my delta times at all. No. But if my goal is to just see the traffic at all, then hey, great, that's so fabulous. But if my goal is to see good delta times, yeah, don't go there.
So the delta times are stamped from the initiating NIC? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, wouldn't that be really cool if that worked that way? No, that is so not how it works. No, the delta time...
I'm right with you.
Okay? The delta times, when you look at those delta times, that's based on, okay, so, you get to be the server, and I'm Wireshark, all right? This is the card that's going to timestamp it. When it left you, that was like 3 days ago. But to me, boom, I saw it, boom, I'm timestamping it. So it's all in reference to where the analyzer is. So that's why when I was talking about, how fast should that server respond, I'm basing on the fact that I am nearing that server's port. I'm as physically close to that server as I can get, as opposed to going over here at the client. Because the client is going to have, client processing time and network delay. I want to be at the server so I can see how fast the server responds. Now, if my goal is to see network delay, then fine. The difference between the SYN ACK, so remember I'm capturing at the server, right? The difference between the SYN ACK and the ACK, there's my network delay. Because it had to go through all the network. The client saw it, sent the ACK, passes by me, the analyzer, right up there, and then hits the server. So the difference between the SYN ACK and the ACK is the client processing time, which is also, remember, that's the fastest he's ever going to respond, and the network delay. So I just look between those two packets for network delay. Okay? But yes, it's whoever was capturing the data is the one who's going to do the timestamps. Yeah. Okay. Oh, there's my clicker. Okay. What did I get? Okay, valid delta times, true order, consistency. Oh, yeah. So I'm like flicking this stuff through 8 switches in the trunk ports. And depending on my design, if I have a beautiful little, daisy chain thing going on, then the traffic's always going to travel the same path. But, who has that, right? I have a hierarchical, I have to work on that word, hierarchical layout. Then my traffic might come to me via those 8 switches in completely different paths, because I have redundant links. So, the packets might come to me in completely different orders based on what they were actually done. Because each one is sent to the analyzer maybe via a different path. I don't know. Okay, so I have to bear that in mind. And then, of course, we're going to have droppage, depending on the load, on all of those trunk links. Now, so I have to go ahead and create an RSPAN VLAN on all of the switches involved in the path. Because remember, at the source and at the destination, we're going to tag it. That's how it's going to physically get there. So all the servers all the switches in the path have to be tagged for that trunk VLAN. All the trunks have to be tagged for that RSPAN VLAN. Ooh, that one's hard to say. And, of course, all the switches in the path have to support RSPAN. And I have to go ahead and allow the RSPAN VLAN on all of the trunks. So I have some configuration issues that I have to do in order to make this happen. All right? And then, of course, not all vendors or all models will support it. So I'm like, oh my God, Betty told us about this really cool thing, and I can have all of VLAN 20, and my analyzer is going to be so great. And then, oh, crud, yeah, this doesn't even support it. Shoot. Oh, well. So you got to bear that in mind. Okay. Now, all right. So, span, RSPAN, now, tag. So remember, my goal is still to see that traffic. Because remember, now you're plugged into your little Lisa switch and you see yourself. It's fun. And it's a great way to learn. But then after that, you want more. Okay? So it's like crack. You get that little taste and you want more. All right? So now I want to capture lots and lots of data. So now I want to go ahead and I want good delta times, right? Because, it's me and I'm dying for those good delta times. So now I'm going to go ahead and use a tab. Right? And I have various tabs. You can all want to come up later after we're done and look at each one of them, see the differences, blah, blah, blah. But I'm going to go ahead and put a tab in. Now, in the beginning, there were hubs, and they were good. And we used to use a hub, to go ahead and make copies of the packets and send them out to our analyzer. But, I have not carried a hub in my purse in years, okay, because I'm just not using a hub. All right, seriously. Because, if I'm capturing everything going to and from this client, and I slip a little hub in there because I want to go ahead and capture everything for that client, Well, you know, that client was going 100 megabit full duplex. And I stick a hub in there. Is that client still going 100 megabit full duplex? No. And in reality, let's just face it, more likely that client's going gig. Is there any such thing as a gig hub? No. Okay. So that's why I love tabs. Okay. So what a tab is a splitter. Think of it as a full duplex hub. It's going to make a copy of everything coming in or out of that tab. That's what it's for. So I go ahead and my goal is to see all the traffic coming from the switch up top to the switch down here where my users are. And I take the cable that used to be there and go ahead and plug it into one port on my tap. Then put a new cable in, other port on the tap. And the purpose of the tap is to go ahead and make copies of those interfaces on over to my analyzer. Now, you notice I have two analyzers there. Depending upon the tap, what I've done is I've just split out the two channels, A and B. So one port here makes a copy on over to the analyzer, right? On over, and then we capture with this Wireshark. And then over here on port B, that everything's being sent to or from it goes ahead and goes over to port B for the analyzer port B. Okay. And which is great if I've got two analyzers, or I just put two cards in the same laptop. That's what I do, and then merge the files together. So that is great. So what I get when I capture off the tap is every single packet. I don't have the droppage issues. I'm not requiring anybody to do any type of buffering. So I get every packet in the correct order, going under the assumption that I have got the correct timing issues, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And now I have valid delta times. And this is the one that I love. I now have the ability to capture whatever I want without going through all the politics of saying, hey, George, could you set me up a span session? Because, of course, I'm not supposed to touch the switch. Because remember, I'm the one who caused the loop, right? Okay, so they're never going to let me do it again. So now I can go ahead and set up a span session. And just tap in so I don't have to worry about setting up a span session. Excuse me. Now, what I don't get, both channels in the same trace. So now, going back to what Mike said, so I may not have the right granularity in order to get those traces aligned. Okay, so I have, right, so we started with the little baby tap, and we're moving up. So I go ahead and I have a aggregation tab that is designed to go ahead and aggregate those two trace files together. So, or two streams together, forgive me. So now its job is to go ahead and interlace those packets for me. So instead of keeping the two channels split out and having two analyzers, I plug one analyzer in, and it's the tap's job to go ahead and merge the streams together. Okay? And it's the hardware designed to do that, as opposed to my little schleppy driver that I paid all $30 for. Okay? So then I get really into it. And I have a tab that actually will timestamp them here. Yeah. And then send them to my Wireshark. Okay. So, depending on my tab, it may just go ahead and merge the streams together, and then I'm capturing them, and then it's my driver who does the timestamp. Or, I actually have the box do the timestamp. I'm bringing it into Wireshark. Okay? Because now, this is my driver. And my world is perfect. Then we're in Midland. Okay, so now and that's referred to as aggregation. However, if I'm using an aggregation tab, okay, so going back to help me because you don't have your little name tag thingy on. What is your name? Jeff. Okay, so going back to what Jeff was talking about as far as having the I've got 50% utilization. Well, let's pretend I have 51% utilization for each channel. Well, I'm now over 100%, aren't I? Yeah. So if I'm doing aggregation on my really cool aggregation tab, yeah, now I'm oversubscribing, and this thing is not designed to buffering. I mean, that was like the whole goal, was to not buffer, right? That's why I bought it in the first place. So now I run the risk of oversubscribing. which is why I love this one, because when I'm in that scenario, I go ahead and I make it split out, and when I'm in the lower, 10% utilization scenario, it'll aggregate them, and I can tell it to go back and forth. Yeah, that's what I want. So we'll do both. Okay. So I want to think about the fact that I might oversubscribe. All right. Now, in a gigabit environment, more likely I'm not hitting 50% in my gig. But in 100 megabit, very possible. Okay. And then, of course, I can't span entire VLAN at once unless I have, 47 tabs, which, of course, I'm sure, tab members will love you to do that. But, I have 3. So, there's a resource issue. Okay. So, depending on how many people I'm able to go ahead and span tap at one time. So, what does it cost? It depends on what kind of tap I get. Okay. So, small, medium, large, a little bit of money, a lot more money, a lot more money. So, there you go.
Okay. 4 digits, 5 digits?
There you go. Well, just like my granularity for my delta time. Exactly. Then, of course, if my environment is redundant and load balanced, and I have multiple paths, I've got to tap each one. So now multiply that by, how many I've got to buy. But remember, this is Bettyland, where everything is perfect, and I can have whatever I want. Okay. So it just, it depends. Okay. Alrighty. What else does it cost? Well, when I popped in my handy-dandy, really fabulous, cool tap, I had to bring that link down in order to do that. Remember, I unplugged the cable and plugged it into my tap, and then got myself another cable and plugged it into this switch. That means I have no link right here while I'm doing that. Okay. So, gotta have a change control window. So, the goal then is you put a tap in and you leave it there. It's not like a span session where I span this for a little while, look at this, and then I span this for a little while, look at that, and then I span this for a little while, then look at that, because I can, right? That's perfect for that. A tap, you bring that link down, and that's to your entire server farm. I'm sure we don't want to do that every 20 minutes. Okay? Yeah, there we go. So that is done during change control mode. Okay? So I put the tap in, and then I leave it there. Okay? So, of course, then if I'm not capturing anything, that's not the most efficient use of the resource. Yeah. But then, okay, I get the really handy-dandy cool tab. That'll go ahead and aggregate them, right, together. Remember how we love that, right? Then it'll go ahead and make another copy, regeneration, and send it to the IDS. And that is up all the time. So then I go ahead and I'm like, yeah, that's why I need to buy that. Can I have a PO for that? Okay? So, well, it depends on how you look at it. Now, here's the other issue. So I put it in, and I leave it there forever, right? Now I have a single point of failure on the mission critical link. So if my tap goes bad, my link goes down. Yeah. You can have it all, but you can't have it all at once. Alrighty, so those are my costs. Okay, so let's play. Which one should I use? I have a nice little simple network here. Oh, and when I upload these slides to Case Technologies page, you know how, like, for all of the different presentations, you can download slides. When you download the slide set, inside the PowerPoint is going to be the reference for where I stole these network diagrams. Okay. Now, so let's say that this is our environment. We've got, some little users down here. Got a nice little server up here, and users are complaining of slow response time from the server. So which should we do? Should we span? Should we rspan? Should we tap? What do you want to do? This would be the audience participation portion of the discussion.
We'll span.
Okay, right, because it's, okay, so all answers are correct if you can tell me why. So yeah, sure, that'd be a good idea. Why, Jeff?
It would seem that it's a simple enough environment with a single path and you have ports available on the switches.
Okay. Now my next question is going to be, what port do you want to span? Where do you want to put the analyzer? Where do you want to put Wireshark?
User complaining on the slow response time from the server, right, on the server to see how it is, what its delta is between its SYN and its SYNAC.
Exactly. I'm going to go ahead and look at server response time from that server to see if it's a resource issue or if it's an application issue. Let's say that when I capture here at the server, I don't see any slowdowns in any of my handshakes. Every single connection looks good and fabulous, right within my expectations. And then the response times are well within the application expectations. Now what do you want to do? Mike's like dying to say something. Go ahead, Mike.
I put an aggregating tab between the firewall and the switch.
Okay, here?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, why?
Well, you can see all traffic that possibly is right.
So all my little users.
All your little users, you
in
can see
here.
the traffic to the DMZ, and you can see the porn that they're browsing that's causing all the problems.
Bad enough, I have to actually say, now, watch my movie on lovemytool.com, but now, of course, we have to introduce porn into the discussion. Thank you, Mike.
Sorry.
It's all right. I love you, Tim. Okay, so, anyway, yes, also a good idea, okay? What else could I do? So if my goal is now, all right, so now, you know, the server looks good. It might actually be the network. Oh my gosh, now I got to start to move my analyzer, right? So I could go ahead and tap here and or span here for this uplink. See, the issue is going out to the firewall. I could go ahead and span this interface here or put a tap here to see if the issue is the firewall itself and it ain't coming down. You know, it hits the firewall, but then it didn't come in. Okay? Or maybe when the world is perfect, because remember, this is Bettyland, right? We're going to go ahead and look here and here. So I go ahead and maybe I set up a span session here, and then I put a tap here, because you know, remember I only have so many taps, maybe? Okay. So I'm going to mix and match. So I see stuff go into the firewall, stay in there a little while, and then come out. So now I can see the latency being induced by the firewall. Again, focus on delta times. Okay.
So you've got two separate files, right?
Yes.
And so you've got, for your delta time, you have to have your time synced well.
Yes, yes. Challenge there. Yes. Yeah. Then we're back into the situation of if I've got two different laptops, I have to sync their time as much as possible, which you know how it depends on how granular NTP physically can get on my operating system. Okay. And then I'm in the scenario of, let's say I have one laptop, and hey, it's right here on the firewall. So I'm going ahead and looking at this traffic because we're still here in the same rack, let's say, and I'm going ahead and looking at both of them, and I have one analyzer and two cards. So at least my timestamp is coming from the same OS, but then we have the issue of how granular the driver of the card can be. Okay. Then again, hey, in the world's perfect, we built a big dog that does the timestamping right there and designed to do it. Okay. So, yes, it depends. Okay. But when you are getting into staying in the firewall for hundreds of milliseconds, then microsecond differentiation because of the driver and my two cards, you can get past it. If you're looking at a scenario where every single millisecond counts in delay, then
10 minutes and counting.
Okay. Then okay, fine. Now we're at the issue of, all right, when do we really care? But if you can really tell, it's going in that firewall and it's really staying in there for tens of milliseconds, hundreds of milliseconds, then if I'm off a few micros, yeah. So it depends.
So, I guess to be expeditious in troubleshooting, if you can put two taps up, you put two taps up.
Oh yeah. When the world is perfect, that's why I have like 3 in my purse.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a big purse.
So one span, basically you're trading time for equipment or whatever.
Right. Yeah. See, I'm starting with, I'm going to go ahead and do a span session right here, look at that server, and now, okay, well, yeah, here's your problem, it's your server. Boom, I'm done. Okay, and remember, I bill by the day, so if I find out the problem within the first 15 minutes, I get to go home. You know, you're going to pay me for the whole day. But if now I go ahead, so I'm going to start right there, because more than likely that's the problem. Okay, in my years of experience, that's what I'm facing. So I look at here. Oh, that's not the problem. Oh, okay. Because it was so easy to set up a span. I didn't have to do a change control for that. I didn't have an outage for that. Then, oh, that's not the issue. Okay, fine. Now I'm breaking out the taps. I need to go ahead and schedule outages to put these in. And we're going to have to work a little bit harder. I'm obviously not going to be leaving by lunch today. Okay, so yes. I start out in the most expeditious and working my way out to the most logistically complicated. Yeah.
So what did you know before you started on site?
Okay. Right, so the whole reason they brought me in were users were just complaining with slow response time from the server.
That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know how many clients, where the server was, what the traffic route was between the clients and the server.
Yeah, well, they gave me a diagram which, may or may not be correct. Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So normally what I do is I set up my little span session, I start my captures going, and then I go do my user interviews. So, what's really going on? All right, now when you access it, do you have that same problem all the time, or is it just when you log in, or, what's really going on? Yeah. Getting the more info from as many different points of view as possible is perfect. Because, when I talk to the person who brought me in, because they have it in their head, they know what's wrong, because they've already looked at, 15 things, and so of course they know what the problem is, right? And most of the time they do, but maybe not, maybe it depends. So I go ahead and have it set up capturing, and then I'll ask different people. I'll ask the sysadmin what they think. I'll ask the end users what they think. I'll ask the database developers what they think. And then when the world is truly perfect, if I can get them all in the same room at the same time. And we started having the discussion of where is this traffic actually physically traveling? Oh, yeah, well, we set that up on server A, and we've got it going, and, oh, no, wait, Bill, I changed that over onto that other switch, last Tuesday. Didn't I tell you about that? No, you did not tell me about that. Oh, well then, I changed how the server works, and it does these back-end calls to this other server. Didn't I tell you about that? No, you did not tell me about that. And so if I can get them all together, I usually find all of that stuff out. Meanwhile, I'm still capturing on that server. Okay. Now, let's try a different scenario. So users are complaining of slow web response. This one's a little bit more complicated. I've got load balancers, I've got accelerators, I've got a corporate LAN on down here, and I have different routers involved. So let's say that, oh, and I have, of course, more than one server. In the perfect world, I have one server that does each task, and it's so easy to span that single port. Then in real life, I have a load balancer, and I've got 30 servers. Now where do you want to go ahead and put the analyzers? And what do you want to use?
So the users, where are the users?
Users are down here in the corporate LAN. I know it's hard to read. It's as big as I could expand it. But yes, users are on down here in the corporate LAN.
They're trying to get to...
So I've got web servers here, and then I've got XML accelerators here, and then more web servers here. And they've got to come in through this router to go ahead and get to them. Yeah. Where do you think we should put it down?
Slow web response.
Slow web response. See, now's when I want to go ahead and get a little more info from my users. Okay? Because in the first scenario, it was easy. I had one server. Boom, I'm done. Now I'm going to have to get more info from the users. Now we're going to have to get into all right, is it everybody in the corporate LAN? Is it any particular page? Is it all web server? Is it, yeah, I've got to have a little more information.
So that was a trick question. You didn't cover that in your other slides.
I told you, I start small and I work my way up. Okay, but you see the next one, it's even worse. So let's say that it's, all the web servers. Because let's say that these are all different web servers that are pulling up different customer data. And we're having to pull up customer, we're at a call center and we're pulling up customer info and saying, yes, you're covered, whatever. So being able to access that data is business critical. And nobody can give me a hard line as to which server it is because we're load balancing, and so we're not really sure which server we're hitting. To the user's point of view, it's all one server, but in reality, it's 30. So where do you want to put the analyzer?
Looks like you need a tap on either side of the secure XML router.
Okay. So yeah, we'll go ahead and put one here and here. Yes?
No, I was thinking...
Here and here?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Corporate
Okay.
name.
So before and after to see if I'm having issues here. Okay. So that way I can eliminate that from the problem. Because, it's hard to go over here. So I want to do what's logistically easiest first. Okay. So yeah, so I go ahead and I tap here and here. So I can see if there's any latency being induced here. Now I can go ahead and look at the clients requesting the data and the servers responding. And number one, to make sure they're responding. Okay, am I having a lot of retransmissions issues? Is it a physical problem and that's why there's latency? Or is it just, if I don't have a physical problem, I just have issues with my droppage here or latency because of load balancing?
Does that mean you wait overnight for him to put the tap in for you?
Yeah, because that requires an outage, doesn't it? It depends. Depends on when you can do a change control. Depends on the company and things like that. Sometimes I can't even do it at night. That's why they love to do spans because it's so much easier. I don't have to have an outage to do it. But even in some places, in order to set up a span, I have to have a change control time. So it depends. Okay, which of course is the answer to all questions. It depends. Okay, so we're dealing with that. Okay.
But you were saying not to use a span for an entire VLAN.
Well, what I love to do is span the trunk port. Because that's a single physical interface. And watch everything coming through that trunk link. But I don't want to go ahead and say on the switch itself,
Go to an access point. And say,
right, and go ahead and I want, ports 1 through 24, which happen to be VLAN 20, please span VLAN 20. That's what I don't like to do. Okay? But I'd love to hit that uplink and span it. Yeah. So, and there goes back to the discussion. What's the physical path of the data? And oftentimes that requires getting everybody together in the same room to find out. Yes. So I would want to go ahead and look to see what kind of latency is being induced here. I would want to go ahead and look what kind of latency is being induced by my load balancers. Maybe my possibility is I think they're load balancing and they are not. And that's where my trouble is, right? So if I'm looking at both of these and I'm looking at conversations list and I see that we're hitting this IP address and never this one, there's my answer right there. Okay, load balancing is not working. Or I go ahead and I hit these servers and I realize that my load balancer is supposed to send it all, balance it between my 30 servers here, but everything happens to be going right here. There's my problem. So as I move my analyzer out, I move either my span sessions out or my tap out, then I can see those things. So I like to go ahead and maybe span first to see those kind of issues, because those are easy to find. And then if that's not the trouble, then I want to go ahead and have the change control at night with taps in. Now, there we go. Let's say we've got phones. All right, we have our beautiful Cisco design, right? And users are complaining of phone call disconnects. Yeah.
It looks like a transformer.
Doesn't it? It kind of does.
The next slide you would...
Right, and it would transform. Okay. So let's say that the complaint is phone call disconnects, and I've got phones hanging off the switches on the access layer, and then my my access layer down here, and then my call manager is hanging off the distributions layer. Okay, so my middle switches, and then I've got my core. Users are complaining about disconnects. Now, where do you want to go? I know, aren't they evil? This is like the last discussion of the entire thing and the entire conference, and I asked like the hardest question. So, now where do you want to go? You were going to say something, Jeff, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, we're going to the conference room to get more information.
Yeah, is it like everybody? How many call managers do we have?
Yeah.
Is it all the phones? Is it when you're dialing internally versus externally?
Because you don't know, I mean, you're outside the organization, you're coming in, you don't know anything, and you've got a transformer network that you're trying to figure out. So,
Yes.
that being said, you now want a real answer.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do want to get more information.
Yeah.
Yes. Because if I'm looking at a VoIP issue, let's say that I look at all the traffic going up to the call manager, and the session is, so it's not an issue with the disconnects happening because of issues with the call manager or the call setup process. You know, if this is H323, all of those protocols, or Cisco Skinny, that protocol, or this is SIP, that protocol. So it's not an issue. I've already analyzed that, and it's not an issue with the call setup. It's a problem with the calls themselves. The RTP packets, the real-time protocol packets, the actual voice packets. So the issue is the VoIP packets themselves. This is the leading part of the question. VoIP packets themselves. Am I going to want to set up a span session, or am I going to want to tap for that?
Well, I mean, could you do a span for the call manager report?
Yeah, like, okay, so let's say hanging off here, I've got my call manager, and I set a span for that. That's cool. No worries there. But I don't see any problem there. It's not like the call manager is disconnecting the calls, and I see like TCP resets or something like that. Then I'd be all set. And I'd do that first because it's easiest, right? Okay, logistically and everything. But that's not the problem. So now I'm getting into the actual voice stream itself. Who sat through Sean Wahlberg's presentation on VoIP? So right, latency, jitter, right, and drops, packet loss.
Right.
These are my 3 core issues in voice over IP, right? So is that a span or is that a tap situation?
I heard tap.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Because remember, my goal is to see if I'm having a jitter issue. Well, because remember, it was like, I should see packet, 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 right? I shouldn't see packet, 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 right? I don't want that, right? That's jitter, okay? So if I set up a span session, my switch is buffering that data and sending it down in a beautiful pattern that's so perfect. It's absolutely fabulous. No jitter at all. Yay! No, but in reality, I go ahead and I look at the phone itself, and I tap the phone itself, and I see that whole, packet, 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 and I'm like, okay, there's your problem. Okay. So, yes, that's the tap scenario. Okay. So span was perfectly good for the call manager, not so great with the phone itself. Okay. So it depends. All right. So what's the answer? It depends. That's right. On your goals, on your budget, on your issue, on your politics, and your change control policies. So the Betty Land approach. I use NetFlow or SFlow to see the big picture, where the issues are, and get statistics from all of my switches before I actually even get into Wireshark. Then I use Wireshark to go ahead and look at specific issues. Because I want to look at that 30,000-foot view to see where my issues are. And then I'm like, okay, now start to narrow down here. Because you can't capture it all and then look at it in Wireshark. That you're just not going to get it. I mean, can you imagine? Okay, so this is my network diagram, Betty. I'd like you to sniff the whole thing. Sure. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and use statistics to figure out where my issues are, kind of narrow down the scope a little bit. Okay. Then I'm going to use Wireshark to look at my specific issues. Tap when possible, span when necessary. Focus on one issue at a time. And remember, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once.